But then people who don't understand it just start creating religions and rules and constructs around these people. But it's really interesting because when you dive into especially Christianity, Jesus wasn't a Christian. My name is John Davis, and I had a very strange experience. I was raised in a very Catholic family by a very Catholic mother. My mom had her master's degree in liturgy and was literally head of liturgical doctrine at our Catholic church. And I was very blessed that my mom was a very open-minded person spiritually. And when I turned 18, she literally said to me, spirituality is a personal journey. Go find what you believe. And I started studying everything from Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i and Islam. And I just started studying everything to find what I truly believe. And I had kind of settled on being an agnostic, someone who believed there was something greater, but not really defining what it was precisely. What happened was I started to go through this process of paring things away that didn't make sense to me. And then I found myself performing at a Renaissance festival. I used to do a comedy sword fighting show at Renaissance festivals all over the United States. And I found myself in a park in New Orleans. And in that park, about a week before, I'd seen on television these Buddhist monks who had gone into a freezer with wet towels on them, warmed their body up so high that the towels were actually 120 degrees when they came out of the freezer. And I found myself at this Renaissance festival in New Orleans, and it just happened that it was really cold that night. It was a frigid night, right at freezing. And I said, well, I saw that thing on TV. I wonder if I can do that same thing. And I started just to focus on my feet, and as I was focusing on my feet got warm, and I slowly brought the heat up my body. It came all the way up to my chest, and when it came up to my chest, it wouldn't go any higher. And when it got there and wouldn't go any higher, I started actively trying to push it. And then I heard what I would consider a thought, or many people can call it a voice, that said, just relax into it. And I relaxed into it, and boom, I was out of my body, and I was in this pure white expanse. And I could see in the distance, no end, but you knew you were inside of something, but you were literally feeling this expanse was there, but you couldn't see the end. And all you could fear was this I say pure love, but words do not in any way, shape, or form encompass what you're experiencing there. There is nothing but this essence of pure love. It's the oneness of love. And in that expression, I'm sitting there and I'm feeling like a child because I'm in awe of what I'm witnessing. And I'm seeing off in the distance what looks like people, but I really can't tell what they are. And as I sat there, and I felt this just overwhelming presence of just pure one being. That's the only way I can really say it, the oneness of this being. And I stayed in that for quite some time. And then what happened in this first encounter, and I've had three, unfortunately, very fortunately, actually. In this first encounter, I just kind of drifted back into my body and back into this space. So it was kind of like an introduction to being there. So that was the first encounter. The second encounter was actually much later, about 7 years later. I was working at the Renaissance festivals, like I said, and I had a psychic come up to me and literally tell me that I walked with Jesus in a past life. And I was like, you're crazy. Don't talk to me about that stuff. I don't want to hear that. But what happened was she was the first of 19 who just walked up and told me that exact same thing. Now, being a young Catholic boy, I was like, no, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy who thinks he's an apostle or something like that. And so finally, I went and I had a past life regression just because I didn't want to hear psychics telling me. Well, when I went and got the past life regression, I went to a certified hypnotherapist out of Washington, D.C. area. And she took me for a week and she basically trained me to her voice. I would do meditations with her so that when we did the regression, I was really comfortable with her voice and who she was. So we came to the regression and she took me down and I remembered this experience. And what was happening was in the regression was I was on a beach and there was a crowd over to my left. And I walked over to the crowd and I could feel that pure love again. In this regression, I could feel that pure love in that crowd. And I go into that crowd and there's this guy standing there and he looks at me and you can literally feel the pure love that I felt out of body before coming from this person. And he looked at me like he'd known me my entire life. He walked over, he laid his hand on my chest, and boom, I was back in that white space, fully embraced in that pure love. And I was being shown that our very nature is that love. And when we come to that, when we go out of body, when we have a near-death experience, we travel through our belief into that expanse, but the beliefs are of the physical world. And so now I'm in that space again, and I'm being shown that the physical world is just a place for us to experience fears and anxieties, an illusion of separation from that oneness of love. And so being in that illusion of separation, you get to come back to that experience and experience that pure love more fully, because you didn't get a chance to experience it when you're here fully. So being here gives you the contrast. So eventually what happened was the regressionist actually brought me out of it. So my second experience was remembering a near-death experience. They would call it a near-death experience. I would just call it a crossing over experience in a past life regression. The third time that it happened, I was getting very good at getting out of my body. I was practicing out-of-body experiences. And this was, oh my gosh, this was easily another 5 or 6 years later. And I was practicing getting out of body, and I got very good at just literally getting out of my body and looking at my body. Well, one day I decided to try something called astral travel, where you go away from the body further. And one night I did a really amazing experience traveling to my friend's home and actually coming back with information that I was there. So the next night I was like, this is great, I'm going to do that again. And I went in to go out of body, and bam, I was back in that white expanse again. Only this time there were 3 people standing in front of me. And the first one looked at me, it was a man and 2 women. And the man looked at me with this just loving smile, and it was like a smile of a parent looking at just a little kid, and I felt like a child in that moment. And he says, you're not supposed to be here yet. And these 2 women come around and literally tickled my body back into the physical. The way my life has changed after these 3 experiences has been incredible. When I look at the wall over here beside me, I no longer see the wall as a flat wall. I see the trillions and trillions of dots that make up that wall. But what's really interesting is when I look that way, the dots are not flat. It's like I'm seeing the grains of the universe now. And I came back with this real understanding that our life here is a matter of literally managing and overcoming our fears and anxieties and coming back to that space. And so as I go through life now, my life is so much more joyful. I have no fear of death at all. I walk through this world in just a joyful experience. And what's really interesting is, as I've been working with people over the years with my private sessions that I do, I get to help people come to that space where they empower themselves, release those fears and anxieties, and come back to their own feeling of love within themselves. So to me, it's a matter of, the Buddha said the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And when I look at that phrase, that makes perfect sense to me with what I learned when I crossed over. We are all part of this oneness of this source that we cross over to, and that source is made of this pure essence of love. And to be here in the physical is literally to experience the illusion of the illusion of duality. And when we go back to it, we come back to it. So what I tell people is to exhale, because we have this experience of whenever we have a fear response, we hold air in our lungs. And so the first thing you should do when you get into any sort of fear response is to exhale, because when you exhale, you're actually releasing the fear from the body and coming back to that neutral state of love. And the other thing is it's all about getting very present. because the past is done. It's just a collection of present moment memories, and the future is just a place where we set goals for our next present moment. But we never get to the future. We're always here in the present. And so it's a matter of bringing that fearless present moment state here so that you can then create a brighter world in that way. So my life has changed in the fact that I walk through my life and it's just so joyful. And I walk up to people and they smile at me, and I smile. I hold doors. I don't meet anybody who I don't like. It's just beautiful. My personal belief is, well, let me just say this up front. I have no religion. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Hindu. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not any of it. I believe that all of those are literally dogmas and rituals and ceremonies that take us away from our present moment self. And so people like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, I think these are people who discovered this oneness of God. I think they're men and many women just like me who found this oneness of God, and we're sharing it. If you look at the teachings of Jesus, he says, "Greater works than I have done you will do. It's your faith that heals you. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can ask a mountain to move, and it will move." He always said these statements that gave the person in front of him the power. He was never saying it's me. He never deified. And then, of course, when you get into the main religions, are all come from what they call the Abrahamic line. Judaism is from the prophet Abraham, and then Moses was the next prophet, and then Christianity claims that Jesus was the Messiah, which is the fulfillment of the Abrahamic religions. And then Islam says that Jesus was just the next prophet in line, and Muhammad was the next prophet in line. In fact, in Islam, it literally says it's against Islamic law to deify Muhammad as the Christians have deified Jesus, the son of Mary. And then after Islam, there's another faith called the Baha'i faith, and they believe they're the next prophet in line. So what I think happens is there's people in the world who find this oneness of God, and they start telling people how they can, release their fear and come back to this place. But then people who don't understand it just start creating religions and, rules and constructs around these people. But it's really interesting because when you dive into, especially Christianity, Jesus wasn't a Christian, and when you read the Bible, he's constantly saying he doesn't follow the Jewish principles either. He was just being in this one space, right? And so when you come back to the idea of religion just being, stories and dogmas and rituals made up around individuals who found their divinity within themselves, I think all of them are just amazing people who've found something like I found. My world is so beautiful. I create amazing things. And what's fascinating with the work that I do now, I've watched people stand up out of wheelchairs. I've watched people heal themselves from cancer. I've watched a woman came in swelling the size of a grapefruit on the side of her face. And through taking her own belief in her healing, the swelling went down like within minutes, right? But it's always about them stepping into their power and coming into that one experience of realizing they're creating the experience. And so I think religion has kind of disempowered people over the years by making these people up on pedestals, as opposed to saying, look, they're just like us, but they found something interesting. I look at it this way. All of those enlightened avatars that they talk about, I think that they're just people who found something. But imagine if two people were leaving on a trip to the same destination, and one person left 2 hours before the other person. Is the person who left 2 hours earlier better than the person who hasn't left yet? No. But that person who's 2 hours earlier has seen the terrain. He's seen what's going on. He's seen the pitfalls and challenges. And if he's a nice person or she's a nice person, they're going to call back and say, hey, don't do this, don't do this. They're going to just show you how to avoid those things. And I think that's what all religions are. It's just big things build up around these nice people who are showing us what they found. Let's start with the word faith. In Christianity, the word faith means faith in Jesus. right? Now, why is that? Why did they put Jesus up on this pedestal? The reason they put Jesus up on the pedestal is because that Abrahamic religion of Judaism, they had prophecies of a Messiah, someone who was going to come and save them. Now, what happened was, in Christianity, Jesus comes along, and he is this great guy. He's found this power within himself. He's doing all this stuff. He never claimed to be the Messiah. Not one time in any of the writings does he claim to be the Messiah. But what happened was that they started to declare him to be a son of God. When did this happen? Over 100 years after his crucifixion. And it really got formalized in 325 at the Nicene Council, when Rome took over the teachings of Christianity. Rome became a Christian empire. And what's really interesting, when you dive into the Gnostic text, it's fascinating, because the disciples asked Jesus, who do we go to when you're gone? He says, go to my brother James. He doesn't say Peter, but the Catholic Church and the Christian churches all say Peter is the rock. He's the next place, right? So there's a manipulation of things for power. So why would they choose Peter? Because at the end of Jesus's life, he sent all his disciples off to different parts of the world to teach what he taught. And Peter went to Rome. And so for Rome to be the seat of Christianity, Peter had to be the head of the church. And so what happened was that, people started vying for power to control Christianity. But he wasn't a Christian. The concept of Christ, the word Christ is a Greek word, comes from the Christos, which means anointed one. It's the one who was anointed. And what's interesting about that is that when you look at the Bible itself, their oldest texts that they all are going from are Greek. They're not Hebrew. So the books themselves are later period, written by different people, all of them having different agendas for their own religious beliefs. But no, God to me, I kind of believe as Einstein did, the God of Spinoza, a greater consciousness, something that has, that's and more so like a collective consciousness. Because looking at this world here, seeing all these dots and all these specks and all this energy in motion, and I know that when I hold my hand up, I see them there too. So I think that we're all in this. Now, the closest thing I've found to an explanation of this was found in Hinduism, where they say the consciousness of God is called the Sit, and we are the Sit Sat Ki, which is the individual sparks of consciousness within the one God. And so to me, it's more like a collective consciousness of God. And what's really interesting is in my own life is coming to that understanding that this outer world is an illusion of my personal belief. I've been able to create and manifest amazing things into my life. Like I've been able to declare things and have weird things happen to make it just happen. And to me, that's an incredible gift, because I understand this oneness with God, and I understand my part as a co-creator. I believe that we are the inspiration, but God, consciousness, yada yada, whatever you call it, is the paint, the paintbrush, and the canvas. And so, what goes on that canvas with the paint and the paintbrush is what we choose to put into it, which is why that guy had the negative experience in Egypt. These kind of thoughts lead us to another whole element. And right now, there's old age dogmas, there's new age dogmas. The old religions are the old age dogmas. The new age dogmas are just as prevalent, and they're just as I always talk about coming back to the present moment and being fearless, right? But now when you go on YouTube and you start searching, you'll find people talking about the world shifting to the 5D and all these things, right? And I think that's just a new age dogma being created. Over the course of time, words change their meanings. Even like the word ego, when ego was originally developed, it only meant the awareness of self. Now it's got all these people using it in all these different ways of saying it's the egoic mind attacking the spiritual ego, or blah, blah. They're coming all, and I think they're all just pathways away from ourselves. So many people believe the earth is like a matrix or an illusion, and I believe it's all an illusion. There's a thing with scientists now for years they've been saying that the Big Bang Theory, talking about the Big Bang Theory. And it's fascinating to me because now they're starting to drop the word theory. Well, when the Big Bang happened, and I'm like, no, it's still theory. It's still a theory, right? And then the James Webb Telescope just went up and said, well, your Big Bang Theory may be wrong. And the scientists went all up in arms, right? I said to a scientist one day, I said, what if the universe is expanding because we keep thinking bigger thoughts, right? It keeps spreading out that way. And so are we living in a matrix? Are we controlled? I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. And I'll tell you why. Because all of those are fear-based thoughts. And I believe that we are all part of this oneness of God, and our experience to be here is to experience fears and anxieties here so that we can go back to that oneness. So I just believe those are fear-based thoughts run amok. I've had a lot of people get very angry with me when I talk about a loving world because they don't believe in a loving world, right? And if you want to have that kind of conversation with somebody right now, in the United States, just start talking politics and you'll have all kinds of fear-based things popping up. It's gotten kind of crazy, right? So in our world, are we in a matrix? No, I don't believe we're controlled by anybody. But if you want to use the definition of matrix as just an energetic illusion, sure. But I think the definition, because of the word matrix, and because it's so related to that movie, The Matrix, I think it has a unique perception or a unique idea that might not be good, right? So there might be a fear-based experience. I think we're all co-creators with the source, and I think that the more you stay in the positive space, you're going to create a positive world. And that's the other thing I think is right now in the world, and I've noticed this over the last 20 years. People are becoming more and more empowered. And what happens is the more empowered they become, the people who are afraid of that are getting louder, and they're saying the worst, most terrible things to people, and they're being mean and rotten. And let me say this. I talk about reincarnation. I talk about the people telling me that I was John the Beloved. I have beautiful messages every day from people telling me how much they love my work, love my videos, love my stuff. The only people who ever say nasty things to me are Christians, and they're nasty. Oh, and then there is one other subset, which because I'm not a vegetarian. Vegetarians sometimes get as harsh as Christians do. So to me, it always comes back to all of those are pathways away from ourselves, and you can take once you start drawing your time close. And what I mean by that is bring your past close, bring your future close, and just be in the present. Just be here and exhale and come to that space of just, I like it here. And when you come to that space, what happens is your world starts to become a beautiful experience because you've created a positive present moment. Now that positive present moment is going to get stacked in your subconscious mind, right? And you make another one because suddenly now that subconscious mind that usually is where we keep all our victimhood and all our struggles of life is now getting filled with positive stuff. So all the negative stuff is getting further and further away. I think in this world, too many people are looking back and calling themselves a victim of things. But when you look at this world and you say, I'm the creator of my experience, then you can put a period at the end of that last chapter and start writing something beautiful. But you got to choose whether you're writing a comedy or a tragedy. In Catholicism, they do not believe in reincarnation. In all Christianity, they do not believe in reincarnation. And my experience with that guy from that past life was not a Christian experience. When you look at it historically, Christianity actually formed long after Jesus walked on earth. Now, if I was trying to explain my experiences of this to an atheist per se, I would start with Einstein. Einstein said that everything that you're looking at is nothing but an atomic energy in motion. It's just atoms. So earlier I was talking about seeing this wall over here and seeing all those dots. The wall over there that I'm looking at is made of atoms. The air between me and that wall are atoms, and my eyes are made of atoms. So that means all of this is just an illusion of energy in motion. Einstein was a very interesting guy because Einstein, when he took found that idea of this energy in motion, he literally said there had to be some sort of greater understanding. He personally believed in the God of Spinoza, which is just a greater consciousness. rather than, a bearded man on a cloud somewhere. For me, what I had to do is I had to strip away all my spiritual beliefs. Like I said, I had studied Buddhism and Hinduism and all those beliefs. And I think it just comes back to this idea of we are our consciousness, and this experience is an illusion, or it's a reflection of what we believe. And I'll give you a couple good examples of that. Let's first start with noetic science, though, because Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, when he was coming back into Earth's atmosphere from space, he literally had a transcendental experience that he couldn't explain. And so for the rest of his life, he tried to figure out a bridge between science and this transcendental experience he had. And he created something called noetic science, which is a very fascinating science to study. But one of the things they discovered with noetic science is that they could measure thought waves. And when they took those thought waves and they focused them to a specific point in space, those thought waves would stop at that point. And their studies, they kind of see evidence that something's happening there. They don't know what it is. But of course, science is looking for empirical evidence. So they're not willing to say what it is yet. But to me, it looks like they're in the early stages of discovering that our thoughts are creative. But then when you take that element of science, our thoughts might be creative and are on the cusp of saying that. And you go over to Buddha, what you think you become, you create your world. Krishna, you are the culmination of your thought. Jesus, as a man thinketh, so is he. Shakespeare, there's nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And so it comes back to your thoughts being a wave of energy that goes out as a reflection. Now, when you look at Nikola Tesla, he said to think of the universe, you have to think of frequency, vibration, and sound. And no, I'm sorry, energy, frequency, and vibration. That's what it was. Energy, frequency, and vibration. And so our thoughts being able to be measured, it's an energy and a frequency that's being sent out into these atomic events, which are reflecting back the image to us. Now, if I kind of take that model and I shift it over to just living life in the here and now. I spent a month traveling through Egypt, and everywhere I went through Egypt, everyone treated me like a prince. I was invited into houses, and I mean, I met so many new friends. And about day 20, I got to Mount Sinai in Egypt, and I climbed Mount Sinai. Now, when you climb Mount Sinai, you start at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you climb for 4.5 hours to get to the top. And the reason you start at 1 o'clock in the morning is because you get to the top just before sunrise. And so I'm climbing, and I was climbing up this mountain an hour and a half. And I heard my name, somebody calling my name, John, and I turn around. It was the manager of the hotel I was staying at, running up the mountain to give me a coat because he thought it'd be cold. That's how I was treated the entire time I was in Egypt. The next day, I come down off the mountain, and I run into another American. He says, "Hey, are you American?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "I'm American too." He says, "Have you been having problems since you've been here?" I said, "Nope, not at all." He says, "Everywhere I go, people want to fight me." Well, 5 minutes later, I wanted to fight him, right? He just wasn't a nice guy, right? But his thoughts were going out to the atmosphere, were going out to the people around him, and he was seeing a reflection of his negativity, right? Negative people will see a negative world, positive people will see a positive world. So I think when you think about it from the form of science or spirituality, I personally think it's all far simpler. I think it really is what we think we become, we create our world. And when I was in my first regression, that was one of the best quotes that came out of it was, "It's so simple, we have a hard time comprehending it." So people talk to me all the time on the concept of reincarnation about wanting it to be their last life. I get that all the time. People ask me this, "I want this to be my last time here," right? Well, the reason they say that is because they're in their fear. They're in an experience, they've had a rough life, and they're saying, "I don't want to do this again," right? But the reality of it is that if we are truly all living in the oneness of the source, this energy, life is eternal, right? The one thing that near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and even my own spiritual experiences have told me is that life is truly eternal. Because I've been out of body looking at my body, and it wasn't me. And so being out of my body, looking at my body, knowing it isn't me, that means the body itself is what quote unquote dies. Now, when we die, what happens? The first thing that happens scientifically, there is anywhere between 10 times to 1,000 times more radiation that comes from the body at the moment of death than any other time. It's measurable. They can measure your body blowing off radiation at the moment of death, right? The other thing is right after that happens, the body starts to decay. Now, here's a really interesting way to think about this from my point of view. I think that this is an illusion of belief. So what's decaying? The thing that's left behind that's decaying is the people's memories of the person. So they're looking at a body that's decaying and it's getting smaller and smaller and fading away because they now all believe this person died. So they're seeing this retreat of this physical illusion.